This is not a story about a girl who fell in love with a millionaire. This is a story about a girl whose life was ripped apart by the one man who was supposed to protect her, her own father. This is the story of Lena, an artist who was about to have the biggest night of her life, and a humiliating truth that was about to be revealed. Lena, at 26, carried the weight of her world, not just in her heart, but in her body. A weight that had always felt like a shield against the cruel expectations of her father, a man who saw success only in numbers and public image. He was a real estate tycoon, known for his relentless ambition. To him, Lena's art was a frivolous hobby, a waste of potential. For years, she had worked tirelessly in her small, cramped studio, the smell of turpentine and oil paints her only companions. She poured her soul onto the canvas, painting vibrant, emotional landscapes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Her works were a rebellion against the grey, soulless world her father built. Tonight was her moment. Her first major gallery exhibition. The elegant gallery hall was filled with the city's elite, their expensive clothes and judgmental eyes, a stark contrast to Lena's comfortable, oversized black dress. She felt vulnerable, her body a silent declaration of her truth in a world that demanded perfection. Her father, Mr. Sterling, stood by her side, a forced smile plastered on his face. "My daughter, the artist," he'd say to his colleagues, the words laced with a condescending tone that only she could hear. He'd then quickly change the subject to his latest real estate deal, as if to distance himself from her failure. Then the moment came for him to give a speech. The crowd hushed, turning their attention to the man who held the purse strings of half the city. Lena's heart pounded with a mix of fear and a desperate hope for a single word of genuine praise. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "Friends, colleagues, tonight we celebrate art." He paused, his gaze fixed on Lena, but his eyes were cold and distant. "My daughter Lena has spent years on this passion, and it's true that she's poured everything she has into it. All her time, all her resources." The silence in the room grew heavy. Lena's smile faltered, a cold dread washing over her. "But talent," he continued, his voice dropping to a low, deliberate whisper, "is not enough. An artist must also have discipline, drive, and in today's world a look that sells. My daughter," he said, gesturing to her with a condescending sweep of his hand, "has struggled with all of these things. She is a testament to the idea that passion alone can lead to failure." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Lena's face burned with a shame so profound it felt physical. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. The murmurs began. The judging eyes were no longer subtle, but openly hostile. And that's when a new voice cut through the noise. It was deep, confident, and utterly unexpected. "Excuse me," it said, belonging to a tall man standing at the back of the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. "I believe you are mistaken, Mr. Sterling." The room fell silent once more, a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mr. Sterling's forced smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. He recognized the man from the back of the room. It was Richard Sterling, his estranged brother and a rival billionaire. Known for his reclusive nature and brutal business tactics, Richard stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Lena, but his words were directed at her father. "Lena's art is a testament to resilience, not failure. To see such talent dismissed in this manner, it is truly a shame." Mr. Sterling's face was beet red. "This is a family matter, Richard. You have no place here." "Oh, but I do," Richard replied, his voice calm, "especially when family matters intersect with outright deception." He then turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the astonished faces. "The art you see on these walls tonight was not funded by Mr. Sterling. It was funded by my late brother, his wife, and their generous trust for Lena's education and her artistic pursuits. A trust that Mr. Sterling has been attempting to illegally shut down for years just to get his hands on the money." The revelation hit the gallery like a thunderclap. The whispers turned to gasps of shock. Lena's mind reeled. Her father had always told her he was her only benefactor. Everything she ever had, she believed, was a begrudging gift from him. Her father, visibly shaking with rage, tried to interrupt. "That is a lie. I have always supported my daughter." But Richard cut him off. "Supported her? Is that what you call manipulating your own child for your personal gain? For years, you told her she was a financial burden, that her art was worthless, all to drive her to abandon her passion. You've convinced her she was a disappointment, while secretly siphoning her inheritance." He walked towards Lena, who was frozen in place, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of shame, but of a heartbreaking, gut-wrenching realization. She had always believed his insults were cruel truths. He had made her believe she was nothing, when all along he was stealing from her. Richard held out his hand to her. "The money is not the shocking truth, Lena. The truth is that your father never gave you a single cent. He took everything, including your peace of mind. What do you think of this shocking turn of events? What would you have done if you were in Lena's shoes? Let us know in the comments below." The gallery descended into chaos. The crowd, a mix of socialites and art critics, turned their backs on Mr. Sterling. The humiliation he had planned for Lena was now his own. Richard led Lena out of the gallery, leaving her father to face the fallout. Outside, the cool night air was a welcome relief, but it couldn't soothe the storm inside her. She looked at Richard, this stranger who had just exposed her deepest family secret. "Why?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "Why are you helping me?" He looked at her, his expression a mixture of sympathy and sorrow. "Because your father's lies were a betrayal of our family's legacy. My late brother created that trust for a reason. He believed in you, Lena, even when you didn't know it. He then revealed more. It turned out her father had been so deeply in debt from a gambling addiction that he was selling off the family's assets, one by one. The trust was the last thing he had left to take. Your exhibition was an act of public defiance to him," Richard explained. "He couldn't stand that you were finally succeeding, so he decided to destroy you, right in the place where you were meant to triumph." Lena finally understood the extent of her father's cruelty. It was never about her weight or her art. It was about his own shame, his own desperation, and his need to control everything around him, even her self-worth. Richard then handed her a business card. "Call me. I'll help you get your money back. And more importantly, I'll help you rebuild your life. We have a lot to talk about." Lena looked down at the card. It was a lifeline. For the first time in a very long time, she felt a flicker of hope. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor. And this was just the beginning of her fight. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this captivating chapter. The journey of Lena has only just begun, and we promise you, the best is yet to come. Lena clutched the business card in her hand. It felt impossibly heavy, a small piece of paper that held the key to a future she couldn't even imagine just moments ago. Richard Sterling, the reclusive billionaire, had just upended her entire life, and for the first time she felt liberated. But with that liberation came a new kind of fear. Could she really trust him? And what would her next step be? The city streets were a blur as she walked aimlessly, the noise and flashing lights of the city mirroring the chaos in her mind. Her father's words echoed in her ears, but for the first time, they sounded hollow. She had always believed she was a disappointment, a burden. Now she knew it was a carefully constructed lie. The weight of that knowledge was both freeing and crushing. She found herself in front of her studio, a sanctuary she now realized was built on a foundation of deception. Inside, her paintings seemed to watch her, each brushstroke a testament to the lie she had lived. The vibrant colors she had always loved now felt like a painful mockery. She saw her reflection in a glass pane, a woman who had let herself be defined by a lie. A large woman, yes, but also a woman with immense talent and a spirit that her father couldn't crush, no matter how hard he tried. Just as she reached for her keys, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Lena, I believe we have much to discuss. Your father will not rest until he has what he believes is his. Call me." The message was signed Richard S. A shiver ran down her spine. He knew she was outside her studio, He was watching her. The fear returned, but this time it was laced with a strange sense of excitement. This wasn't just about money or art. It was a game of high stakes, and she was in it. She took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the street. The anonymity of the city felt both comforting and threatening. She realized she couldn't face this alone. This wasn't her fight anymore. It was their fight, Richard's and hers. She decided to go inside and get a change of clothes. She was done being the victim. It was time for her to start fighting back. She wasn't a pawn in her father's game. She was about to become the queen. Her phone buzzed again, a new message from Richard. First, a word of advice. Don't go to the bank. Don't talk to a lawyer. And don't tell anyone we spoke. Meet me at the Oak Room tomorrow at 9 a.m. Come alone. Lena stared at the message, 1,000 questions racing through her mind. What did he know? Why the secrecy? And what was the Oak Room? One thing was clear. She was no longer in control of her own story. Lena spent the night in her studio, surrounded by the silent witnesses to her life's biggest lie. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's sneer and heard his words of humiliation. But now they were mixed with Richard's calm, confident voice, revealing a truth that was far more sinister than any insult. The Oak Room. The name echoed in her mind. It was an old exclusive club downtown, a place where deals were made in hushed tones and fortunes were won and lost. A place she, in her father's world, would never have been welcome. The secrecy of the meeting unnerved her, but the alternative, facing her father's lies alone, was no longer an option. The next morning, Lena chose her clothes carefully. No more oversized black garments to hide behind. She put on a deep burgundy dress that she hadn't worn in years, a dress that clung to her curves but made her feel strong and defiant. She did her makeup, not to hide, but to highlight her features. She was stepping into a new arena, and she would not come in a disguise. This was her, unapologetically. When she arrived at the Oak Room, she felt the weight of 1,000 judging stares. The host, a stern-looking man in a black tuxedo, seemed to size her up, his eyes lingering for a moment too long. "Mr. Sterling is waiting for you," he said, his voice flat. He led her through a labyrinth of dark, wood-paneled corridors until they reached a private room. Inside, Richard was sitting alone at a large table, a single file folder in front of him. He stood up as she entered, his demeanor formal yet kind. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Thank you for coming, Lena. I understand this must be difficult." She sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "Why all the secrecy? Why here?" Richard leaned forward. "Because your father's spies are everywhere, and because what I am about to show you is a matter of life and death. The trust my late brother, your uncle, left for you is not a simple sum of money. It is the key to a network of illicit deals that your father and his business partners used to launder money and evade taxes. He didn't just want your money. He wanted to destroy the evidence." He pushed the file folder towards her. "This contains proof of his crimes. His gambling addiction led him to a desperate place. He needed money, and his partners needed a scapegoat. They chose you. They chose to frame you for embezzlement from the very trust that was meant to protect you. That humiliation at the gallery? It was a distraction. It was meant to turn public opinion against you, so that when the full weight of their crimes fell, you would be the one to take the blame." Lena's world went silent. It wasn't about her weight. It wasn't about her art. It was about her life. They were trying to send her to prison. Her father had planned to sacrifice her to save himself. A wave of nausea washed over her. How do you know all of this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Richard looked at her, his expression a mix of regret and steely resolve. "Because I've been investigating him for years. And his main partner is my son." The words hung in the air, impossibly heavy. My son. Lena's mind struggled to process it. Richard, the man who had just saved her from utter public destruction, was the father of the very man who was now conspiring to ruin her life. The world was spinning on a razor's edge. Richard saw the confusion in her eyes. "His name is Marcus. He's ambitious. He fell in with the wrong people a few years ago. My brother, your uncle, was one of the first people he wronged, and he's been in your father's back pocket ever since, helping him with his less-than-legal endeavors." Lena shook her head, trying to make sense of the twisted web of betrayal. "So you've been investigating your own son?" Richard's expression hardened. "Yes, my brother left me the trust. He was a good man, but he didn't realize the extent of my son's involvement in all of this. Marcus knew about the trust and told your father about it. They knew the trust's value could be liquidated, and the paper trail could be used against them. So they decided to destroy the trust and frame you for it. The public humiliation at your exhibition was just the first step in a larger plan to discredit you." "But why help me now?" Lena's voice was a whisper laced with skepticism. "Because this isn't just about money anymore," Richard said, his gaze unwavering. "Your father and Marcus are getting desperate. The police are sniffing around a lot of their recent deals. They know they need a fall guy, and they've chosen you. They're planning to leak the financial documents, twisting the facts to make it look like you, the unstable artist, stole money from your own family trust." He paused, a grim look on his face. "They're going to frame you for embezzlement. Unless we act now, you'll lose everything. Your art, your reputation, your freedom." Lena's heart pounded against her ribs. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was a battle for her life. The pain of her father's betrayal was replaced by a surge of cold, focused fury. She would not be a victim, not anymore. She looked at Richard, seeing not a strange millionaire, but an unlikely ally with his own complicated motivations. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice now steady and resolute. Richard pushed the file folder closer to her. "We expose them, but we have to be smart. We can't just go to the police. They've already bought off key people. Our only option is to use the very weapon they're using against us, public opinion. We're going to leak the real story, with undeniable proof, and let the public see them for who they truly are. Your father and my son." Lena looked at the file folder on the table, the papers inside, holding the key to her past and her future. This was no longer just about clearing her name. It was about exposing a web of lies that had taken a part of her life from her. She wasn't just a victim. She was the one who could bring the truth to light. Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on her. "Your father's plan was brilliant in its cruelty. He publicly discredited you, knowing no one would believe you when you spoke up. But he didn't count on you having an ally, or on the truth being so unbelievable," Lena added, a grim smile on her face. They spent the next hour meticulously going through the documents. Bank statements with cryptic codes, offshore accounts, emails detailing money transfers, and even a hidden audio file on a flash drive that contained a conversation between her father and Marcus. They spoke in code about the artist's collection and the final brushstroke, all of it chillingly clear now. "The first step is to get this information to the right person," Richard said, his tone all business. "Someone we can trust, someone who can amplify this. A journalist with a reputation for integrity and a history of taking on powerful people." Lena felt a spark of her old self, the strategic thinker beneath the artist's soul. "I know a journalist, an old friend from art school. Her name is Sarah." She switched from art criticism to investigative journalism. "She's tenacious and she owes me a favor." Richard's eyes showed a flicker of approval. "Good, we'll meet her tonight. But first, you have to disappear. Your father will be looking for you, especially after what I revealed yesterday. He's a cornered animal now, and cornered animals are the most dangerous." He arranged for a car to take her to a secure, discreet apartment. As she stepped out of the Oak Room and into the bustling city streets, she felt a profound change. She was no longer hiding. She was preparing for a fight. The dress, which had felt like an armor earlier, now felt like her uniform. When she arrived at the apartment, it was bare but spotless. A single large window overlooked the city, and from there she could see a part of her father's gleaming corporate tower. The light on the top floor was still on. He was working, planning, but so was she. She pulled out her phone and sent a short, coded message to her friend Sarah. The masterpiece is not what it seems. I have the real canvas. Call me." She then turned to the window, a determined look on her face. She was about to paint her own reality, and this time there would be no lies, no deceptions, and no one else holding the brush. Sarah, a seasoned investigative journalist, had seen it all. But when a cryptic message arrived from an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years, a familiar spark of curiosity ignited. Lena's words, "The masterpiece is not what it seems. I have the real canvas," were a painter's code for a truth hidden beneath the surface. Sarah knew this wasn't a casual reconnection. It was a cry for help. They met at a quiet, unassuming coffee shop, the kind of place where conversations disappear into the buzz of the espresso machine. Lena arrived first, her newfound confidence a stark contrast to the quiet, reserved girl Sarah remembered. A few minutes later, Richard Sterling, a man whose face was a frequent sight on business magazines, slipped into a seat at their table, a subtle nod his only greeting. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Lena, what is going on?" Lena took a deep breath. "This is going to sound insane, Sarah, but I need you to listen. All of it." For the next hour, Lena and Richard laid out the entire, unbelievable story. The trust from her uncle, her father's gambling addiction, the conspiracy to frame her for embezzlement, and the involvement of Richard's own son. As they spoke, they presented the evidence. Copies of bank statements, encrypted emails, and the chilling audio recording. Sarah, a woman who prided herself on being unflappable, was visibly shaken. She sifted through the documents, her journalist skepticism battling with the cold, hard proof in her hands. This is huge. This isn't just a family dispute. This is a massive criminal conspiracy. Your father, a public figure, a pillar of the community, is a fraud. And a monster, Lena added, her voice unwavering. He was ready to sacrifice me to save himself. My exhibition, my public humiliation, it was just the first move. Sarah looked at Richard. "And your son is in on it?" she asked, her voice quiet. "He is," Richard confirmed, his face a mask of disappointment. "And he is just as dangerous as your father." Sarah closed the file, her gaze fixed on the table. The weight of the decision was palpable. Publishing this story could destroy careers, bring down a powerful family, and put them all in danger. But not publishing it would mean letting two criminals get away with their crimes. And worse, letting an innocent person go to prison. She looked at Lena, at the new light in her eyes. "You said you have the real canvas," she began, a small smile forming on her lips. "This is no canvas, Lena. This is a masterpiece of deception. And we're going to expose it for the world to see." A silent pact was formed. The three of them, an artist, a billionaire, and a journalist, united against a common enemy. The battle for truth had officially begun. The next few days were a blur of strategy and caffeine. Lena, Richard, and Sarah met in a secure, anonymous location, turning a small apartment into their own war room. Lena, the artist, was now the chief witness. Richard, the reclusive billionaire, provided the undeniable proof and the resources. Sarah, the journalist, was the architect of their public offensive. "We need to tell a story," Sarah said, her eyes fixed on the documents spread across the table. "Not a dry legal report. We need to tell the world about Lena, the humiliation, the betrayal, the art that was a silent cry for help. The public will connect with that far more than a list of bank account numbers." Lena's heart pounded. She was used to showing her soul through her art, not her personal trauma in a news story. But she knew this was the only way. She had to become the masterpiece her father had tried to destroy while they crafted their narrative. A storm was brewing in the gilded towers of the city. Mr. Sterling, her father, was beginning to feel the walls close in. He had expected Lena to fall apart, to hide in shame, not to disappear entirely. His calls to her went unanswered, and his spies came up empty. He was an animal, and he was losing his scent. "She's with Richard," Marcus, his son, said one evening, his face pale with frustration. "He's the only one who could have made her vanish like this." Mr. Sterling slammed his fist on the table. He knows. We have to find them now. The documents, the evidence, they have to be destroyed. Their panic only fueled the trio's determination. Sarah was a machine, cross-referencing names and dates, uncovering a secret offshore company in the Cayman Islands that held the final piece of the puzzle, a large sum of money meant for Lena's trust, siphoned off just a month ago. This was the final nail in her father's coffin. Lena watched as Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, feeling a strange mix of fear and power. They were getting closer. But as they prepared to release their story, a shocking message arrived on Richard's private phone, a coded threat from Marcus. "Tell your father to stop looking," the message read, "or the truth won't be the only thing that gets buried." The message on Richard's phone was a chilling punctuation mark on their progress. "Tell your father to stop looking," it read, "or the truth won't be the only thing that gets buried." The words weren't a bluff. They were a promise. Sarah, her face pale, stared at the phone. This just went from a legal battle to a criminal investigation with a ticking clock. "This is a direct threat. We need to go to the police." Richard, however, shook his head. "Marcus isn't foolish. He's been at this a long time. He's not just a liar and a thief. He's ruthless. He knows going to the police means he's cornered. He's trying to get me to back off, to make me choose between my son's freedom and my principles." He looked at Lena, his gaze full of a painful sincerity. "He's also trying to scare you, Lena, to make you give up. Because he knows if you don't, you will be his undoing." Lena's heart pounded, a primal fear mixing with a surge of hot, unyielding anger. "He won't scare me. Not anymore. My father already buried me once. I'm not going back under the ground." Her unwavering resolve seemed to solidify their plan. This wasn't about running and hiding. It was about standing their ground and fighting back. Richard, however, knew they had to be smarter, more careful. He made a call to his security team. "They were moving. They're watching this apartment. They'll know we've seen the message and we're planning our next move. We need to go underground," Richard said, his voice low and urgent. Within the hour, a black, unassuming SUV arrived. They packed up the files and laptops, leaving no trace behind. As they drove through the city, Lena watched the familiar lights blur into a stream of color. This wasn't just a physical journey. It was a psychological one. She was leaving behind the girl who had been defined by a lie and embracing the woman who would fight for the truth. They arrived at an unmarked building, a secure location with a hidden entrance. It was a fortress of steel and silence. As they entered, a notification pinged on Richard's phone. A live video feed from a hidden camera in Lena's art studio. Her father, Mr. Sterling, was inside, his face contorted in a mix of fury and panic. He was tearing the place apart, destroying her artwork, looking for any clue, any sign of her. He was an animal, wild and desperate, and he was losing control. But what he didn't know was that his daughter, the girl he thought he had broken, was now watching him, from a place he would never find. Lena watched the live feed from her studio, a grim silence settling over the room. Her father, a man who once looked down on her art, was now destroying it with a frantic, animalistic rage. He threw canvases to the floor, paint splattering across the pristine white space, a furious whirlwind of destruction. He wasn't looking for money or documents. He was looking for her, and in her absence, he was destroying the only thing that had ever truly belonged to her. A tear rolled down Lena's cheek, but it was a tear not of sorrow, but of fierce, cold resolve. This was it. This was the final straw. He had tried to bury her, to humiliate her, to send her to prison. Now he was erasing her very existence. Richard, seeing the fire in her eyes, placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "He's losing control, Lena. He's showing the world exactly who he is." Lena looked at the screen, at the wreckage that was once her sanctuary. "He thinks he's destroying my art," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But he's just giving us our opening." Sarah, who had been watching the scene unfold, looked at Lena with newfound respect. "She's right," she said, a jolt of inspiration in her voice. "This isn't a setback. This is a visual anchor for our story. A powerful metaphor. The broken art is the truth of his broken soul. They quickly revised their plan. The story would not just be a legal exposé. It would be a deeply personal narrative. It would start with her father's public humiliation of her at the gallery, showing the man he pretended to be. Then it would show the man he truly was, captured in that live video feed in her desecrated studio. The physical destruction of her art would become the visual proof of his moral bankruptcy. As they finalized the article, a notification came in. Mr. Sterling had just posted an emergency press release, accusing a disgruntled artist and a corporate rival of attempting to extort him with false claims. He was trying to get ahead of the story, to paint them as villains before they could reveal the truth. He was a master of manipulation, but they had a card he didn't know about. He's trying to control the narrative, Richard said, a hint of a smile on his face. But he's about to discover that a lie can only run so far before it gets buried by the truth. They hit send on their exposé, releasing it to a dozen major news outlets at once. The digital manuscript of Lena's truth was now in the hands of the world, and there was nothing her father could do to stop it. The internet, a place of fleeting trends and endless noise, stopped for a moment to take in the truth. Sarah's article, meticulously crafted and filled with irrefutable evidence, went viral within minutes. The headline was simple and damning. The humiliation was a lie. An artist's father conspired to frame her in multi-million-dollar fraud. The public, which had just witnessed Lena's public shaming, now saw the full, horrifying picture. The video of her father's destructive rage in her studio, provided by Richard, was the key. It was a visceral, undeniable display of a man losing his grip on reality. Social media exploded. Humiliated by her father became a viral hashtag, but with a new meaning, a symbol of a public figure's cruel betrayal. Back in his office, Mr. Sterling watched his world crumble in real time. His phone rang incessantly, but he ignored the calls from his board, his lawyers, and his allies. The press release he had issued just hours earlier now looked like a desperate, pathetic attempt to mislead the public. The tables had turned. The man who had humiliated his own daughter was now the most hated man in the city. But his rage was not yet extinguished. It was now a cold, dangerous fury. He called his son, Marcus. "The fool is working with Richard. She's at a safe house. They have the documents. We have to find them and destroy everything now." Meanwhile, safe in their secure location, Lena, Richard and Sarah watched the news coverage with a mix of relief and fear. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Suddenly, a notification flashed on Richard's computer screen. His security system, which monitored their location, had been breached. Not electronically, but physically. A silent alarm, indicating someone had just entered the building's service tunnels below them. This wasn't a hacker. This was a physical threat. Richard's face went pale. "They're here," he said, his voice a low whisper. He knew this place existed. "He's coming for the documents." Lena looked at the single, heavy file folder on the table. The proof of their innocence, their justice. But now it was a target, and the man who was coming for it would stop at nothing to get it back. The silent alarm was a chilling countdown. Richard's face was grim. "Service tunnels," he repeated, his mind racing. "It's a blind spot in our surveillance. They must have followed us from the club and used a contact in the building's maintenance to get in." He grabbed the file folder from the table. "We have to go. Now!" Sarah moved with a speed that belied her calm demeanor, grabbing her laptop and the hard drives. Lena, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, stood frozen for a moment. Her father was here. He was coming for her. The man who had publicly disgraced her was now hunting her in the shadows, a desperate and dangerous predator. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. An emergency generator hummed to life, casting a dim red glow over the room. "They've cut the power," Richard said, his voice low and urgent. "This is a full assault. No witnesses, no cameras. Just us and them." A muffled clang echoed from the floor below, followed by the faint sound of footsteps. They were getting closer. Richard led them to a hidden door, a part of the wall that slid open to reveal a narrow staircase. This leads to a secondary exit. A failsafe my brother built in case of a raid, he explained, pushing them through the opening. As they descended into the darkness, the faint sounds of a struggle and breaking glass came from the room they had just left. Her father and Marcus, not bothering to be quiet, were tearing the place apart. But they were a step ahead, for now. They emerged from the staircase into a small alleyway, the cold night air a sharp shock to their systems. The city's skyline, a familiar comfort, now felt like a cage. They were being hunted. Richard hailed a passing cab, pushing Lena and Sarah inside. "Drive," he said to the driver, his voice sharp with urgency. "And don't stop until I tell you." As they pulled away, Lena glanced back. She saw two figures in the alleyway behind them, silhouetted by the city lights. One was her father, his form a menacing shadow. The other was Marcus, his face a cold mask of fury. They had found the location. But they were too late. The cab sped through the empty streets, the silence inside a tense contrast to the chaos they had left behind. Lena looked at Richard, seeing the tired lines on his face. He wasn't just a powerful man. He was a desperate father trying to do the right thing, to atone for his son's sins. "He will not stop," Richard said, his voice low. "He will use every resource he has to find us. He has no moral code. You must understand that now, Lena." Lena nodded, her gaze fixed on the passing buildings. She understood. Her father's public persona was a lie. He was capable of anything. He had tried to bury her once. Now he was coming to finish the job. They arrived at a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city, a place so grand it felt like a different world. This was Richard's home, a fortress of wealth and security. The gates closed behind them, a silent promise of safety. Inside, the house was a paradox of opulence and quiet solitude. Richard led them to a study, a room lined with books and old photographs. He handed Lena a glass of water, his hands steady despite the night's events. "This is where we will finish this," he said, his voice now calm and resolved. "We will not run anymore. We have the truth. And we have an audience of millions who have already seen your father's true nature. We will use that to our advantage." Sarah began setting up her laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm pushing the story to every major news network. The cat is out of the bag. There's no putting it back now." Lena watched her, a feeling of deep gratitude washing over her. She had been alone, humiliated and broken. Now she had an unlikely family fighting with her for her. She was no longer defined by her shame, but by her resilience. The final piece of their plan began to take shape. They would not just rely on the news. They would use the full force of social media, live streams and public statements. They would make sure that every move her father made was met with an even greater wave of public condemnation. He had tried to use the court of public opinion against her, and now that very court would be his final judgment. Back in the city, Mr. Sterling's world was a storm of flashing lights and ringing phones. The media, once his greatest ally, had turned on him with a ravenous hunger. His office was besieged by reporters, his name a top trending topic on every social media platform. The damning evidence of his corruption and the video of his frantic rage in Lena's studio was a tidal wave he couldn't stop. But his fury wasn't just aimed at the public. He turned on Marcus, his own son, his face contorted in a mask of betrayal. "You said you took care of everything. You said the girl was no threat." Marcus, pale and sweating, backed away. "I did. We thought she was broken." "But Richard, he's been planning this. He's been investigating us for years. He has everything." Mr. Sterling's eyes narrowed, a cold, dangerous glint in them. "Then we have to hit them where they least expect it. They think they've won. They've only just started the war." He pulled out his phone, a sinister smile spreading across his face. He made a call to an old, powerful acquaintance, a man who operated outside the law, a man who specialized in silencing problems permanently. Safe within the walls of Richard's estate, Lena felt a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in years. The house was a fortress, but more than that, it was a sanctuary. The emotional weight she had carried for so long was slowly beginning to lift. She spent the next day working with Sarah, crafting public statements and preparing for a live interview that would seal her father's fate. She was no longer just a victim. She was the face of a triumphant truth. Richard, meanwhile, was in a different kind of battle. He was on the phone, one conversation after another, cutting off his sons' and his brother's financial lifelines. He froze their accounts, seized their assets, and systematically dismantled their criminal enterprise piece by piece, all in the name of his late brother's legacy. It was a cold, surgical strike, and he showed no mercy. He was a man driven by a profound sense of justice, a man who saw his son's corruption as a personal failure. But deep down, Lena sensed he was also a grieving father, trying to save his son from a life of destruction, even as he was forced to destroy his son's empire. As night fell, a new layer of danger settled over the estate. Richard's security team noticed a small, unmarked drone hovering at the edge of the property, its lens a cold, unblinking eye. It wasn't a journalist. It was a reconnaissance drone, a signal of a far more sinister threat. The man who had been hired by Mr. Sterling was here. He was watching. Richard's face, which had been so calm and composed just moments before, turned grim. "This is no longer a corporate war," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "They're not just trying to ruin us. They're trying to erase us." He immediately initiated a full lockdown. The gates were double-bolted, the security systems set to their highest alert. He then pulled Lena and Sarah into a secluded, panic-proof room deep within the house. "They're coming for the documents," he explained, his eyes fixed on Lena. "And they're coming for you. Lena, they want to finish what they started." Lena looked at the single file folder they had fought so hard to protect. It wasn't just evidence. It was a symbol of her life, her pain, and her coming triumph. She was ready. No matter what her father threw at her, no matter how much he tried to scare her, she would not be silenced. Not anymore. The panic room was an island of steel and silence. Outside, Richard's security team was in full lockdown mode, but the man Mr. Sterling had hired was no amateur. He was a ghost, an operative with a singular purpose. He had bypassed the perimeter sensors and was now systematically dismantling the security feeds, a digital trail of breadcrumbs leading to the main house. Inside the room, the silence was suffocating. Lena sat, the file folder on her lap, its weight a physical manifestation of the truth she was fighting for. She could hear the muffled thuds from the floor above, the faint, jarring sound of a door being forced open. It was a terrifying reality, a direct consequence of her father's desperation. Richard was on the phone, his voice a low, urgent whisper as he gave commands to his security. "Do not engage. This man is a professional. We need to find his point of entry and seal it off." But he knew it was a losing battle. The operative had a goal, and he was getting closer. Suddenly a loud crash echoed from the floor above. A light went out, plunging the hallway into darkness. The man was in the house. He was here for the documents. He was here for Lena. A tense silence followed the crash, broken only by the sound of Richard's hurried breaths. They all knew this was it. The man was on their floor. But just as Richard prepared to make a final call to his team, a new sound echoed through the halls. The voice of a woman, a chillingly familiar voice. It was Lena's stepmother. A woman who had always treated Lena with a cool, distant politeness. Her voice was sharp with fear, a frantic cry for help. "Don't do this, please!" A new realization washed over Lena. Her father's world was not just a corporation, it was a home. He had people, family, who were caught in his web of lies. Was her stepmother a victim as well? Or was this an act, another layer of deception? A new wave of sounds reached them, a struggle, a groan, and then silence. The tension in the room was unbearable. The operative wasn't just here to steal the documents. He had a human shield, a new level of leverage to get what he wanted. He had her stepmother. Richard's face hardened. "He's using her. He knows she's an emotional trigger for your father. And he knows your father will do anything to protect his assets, even if it means sacrificing his own family." The voice on the intercom was a cold, calm monotone. Richard Sterling. "We know you are in the safe room. We have your brother's wife. We will not harm her. If you hand over the file." Lena looked at Richard and then at Sarah. The weight of the world was no longer on her shoulders alone. It was on all of theirs. Her stepmother's life for a file. But the file wasn't just paper. It was justice. It was Lena's truth. Richard took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Lena's. "I'm not doing it, Lena. We're not giving in. We've come too far. Then we will have to make you," the voice on the intercom replied, followed by a new sound, the click of a gun, and the soft sob of a woman. Lena's heart was a frozen lump in her chest. She had planned for legal battles, for public opinion, for lies and betrayals. She had not planned for a hostage situation. She had to do something. She had to act. She looked at Richard, a desperate plea in her eyes. "We need a new plan," she said, her voice a calm she didn't feel. "We are not going to let him win. And we are not going to let her get hurt." Lena took a deep breath, her mind racing. They couldn't hand over the file, not after everything they'd been through, but they also couldn't let her stepmother get hurt. She looked at the intercom, a new plan forming in her mind, a plan born from a lifetime of observing her father's cold, calculating cruelty. "He's not just a professional," Lena said, her voice steady. "He's an employee. He was hired by my father, who is now being publicly humiliated and losing everything. He will not risk a life sentence for a man who won't even be able to pay him." Richard and Sarah stared at her, a silent question in their eyes. "What are you saying?" Richard asked. "I'm saying we make a deal directly with him," Lena explained. "We don't give him the file. We give him a reason to walk away and never come back." She stepped up to the intercom. "Listen to me," she said, her voice clear and authoritative. "My father is a liar. He has nothing left. He cannot pay you. He will hang you out to dry to save himself. But we have proof, and we have a public audience." The line was silent for a moment. Then the operative's voice, now with a hint of curiosity, responded. "What proof?" "We have proof of the money your client was meant to pay you," Lena said, a bluff fueled by pure desperation. "He's not just going to let you go. He's going to frame you for this too. But we can help. We can expose your payment, your conversation with him, and we can give you a new identity and a new life far from him." A faint sob was heard from the intercom. It was her stepmother. Her father had left her behind, just as he had left Lena behind. "How can I trust you?" the operative asked, his voice now a low growl. "You can't," Lena admitted honestly. "But you know you can't trust him. And you know we have nothing to gain by lying to you. We just want to get to the truth." The operative was silent. Lena could hear the quiet murmur of her stepmother's sobs, a silent plea for her to keep going. The clock was ticking, and she knew she had to make a final offer, a move her father would never have expected. "We will give you the hard drive, with the video of my father and his son," Lena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We will give you proof that you were there to save her, not to harm her. And we will make sure the world sees you as a hero, not a monster. You will not lose your life for a man who is about to go to prison." The line was quiet. The stakes had been raised. The operative was a professional, but he was also a man who had just been betrayed by his client. He was a cornered animal, just like her father. But unlike her father, he had a choice. Suddenly the intercom clicked off. Lena's heart sank. Had she failed? Had she just sealed her stepmother's fate? Just then, the outer security alarm sounded. Not the silent alarm, but the full blaring sirens. The police. The security guard was here. Lena looked at Richard, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "You called the police?" Richard shook his head. "No, the security footage of your father's rage in your studio. It has gone so viral that someone must have seen him. The police are here for him." And just then, the intercom crackled back to life. "Leave the file outside the door," the operative said, his voice flat. "The stepmother is with the security guard. She is safe." He had made his choice. The sirens wailed as a wave of police cars descended on the estate, their red and blue lights painting the night in a chaotic, urgent glow. They had come for Mr. Sterling. The public outrage, fueled by the evidence Lena and Sarah released, had forced their hand. He had nowhere left to run. From the safety of the panic room, Lena watched the live feed as her father, his face a mix of rage and disbelief, was led away in handcuffs. He was no longer a powerful magnate, but a cornered animal, a man whose carefully constructed life of lies had finally collapsed. In that moment, a profound emptiness settled over Lena. She had won, but the victory felt bittersweet. The man she had once looked up to, the man who had inflicted so much pain, was now a symbol of his own destruction. Just then, the door to the panic room opened. Richard's security detail was there, and with them, Lena's stepmother. She was shaken but unharmed. She saw Lena, her eyes welling up with tears. "He told me he had to do it," she said, her voice a fragile whisper. "He said you left him no choice. He didn't care about anything but the money." Lena stepped forward and, in a moment that defied a lifetime of cold distance, embraced her. "It's over," she whispered. "It's all over." Richard came to her side, his gaze fixed on the scene outside. "We did it, Lena. We won." But even in his triumph there was a quiet sadness. His own son, Marcus, had been captured a few blocks away and was now facing his own justice. Richard had lost a brother and a son, but he had found his humanity. Months later, Lena's life was a canvas painted with a new, vibrant palette. The stolen money from her trust was recovered, and she used it to open her own art gallery, a place for young artists who had been told they weren't good enough. Her first exhibition was a triumph, a defiant statement of her new beginning. She no longer hid her body in oversized clothes. She wore what she wanted, feeling strong, confident, and unapologetically herself. Her relationship with Richard was one of deep, quiet gratitude. He had become a mentor and a friend, a man who had shown her that true wealth was in integrity and courage. And Zara, the journalist who had risked her career for the truth, became a lifelong friend. Lena often thought about her father, now a footnote in a legal scandal. She didn't feel hatred anymore, just a profound sense of pity for a man who had everything and chose to lose it all. Her life, which had been so close to ruin, had been given a second chance, a second act. She was no longer just a victim. She was a hero in her own story. Her greatest masterpiece wasn't a painting on a canvas, it was her life. A testament to the idea that no matter how much you are humiliated, no matter how much you are betrayed, the truth will always triumph. What did you think of Lena's incredible journey? Have you ever had to fight for your own truth? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the Triumph Stories for more inspiring narratives like this one. Click on the video recommended on the screen and continue your journey of hope and triumph with us.